The auction and the betrayal. Dust swirled across the wooden planks of the small western town square, the air thick with murmurs and disbelief. The townsfolk gathered like moths to a flame, their eyes fixed on a scene both grotesque and mesmerizing. At the center stood Victor Delgado, his shirt unbuttoned, his hair wild, and his eyes gleaming with the madness of desperation. A gambler through and through, he had lost everything to the cards. Now, with debt collectors circling like vultures, he chose his final wager. He was auctioning his own family. Beside him stood Maria, her wrists clenched tightly together as though sheer will alone could hold her dignity in place. Her dark hair framed a pale, expressionless face, but her eyes betrayed her, eyes filled with humiliation, sorrow, and a quiet fury she dared not release. For children huddled close to her. Elena, 16, and already hardened by the cruelty of life. Matteo, 14, whose scowl matched his father's but carried none of his malice. Isabella, the shy 10-year-old clutching at Maria's skirt. And little Gabriel, only 6, too young to understand why his world was unraveling. The townsfolk whispered. Some shook their heads in pity, others in disgust. A man selling cattle was one thing. A man selling his wife and children was another. But no one moved to stop him. Fear of debt collectors and the power of the gambling syndicate kept lips sealed. 6 souls, Victor announced with a mocking grin, his voice ringing out like the crack of a whip. A strong woman and 4 young ones, all able-bodied. Who will start the bidding? Maria flinched. Each word was another lash across her pride. She wanted to scream, to tear herself free, but she stood frozen. This was her husband, the man she had once trusted, the father of her children. Betrayal burned in her veins more fiercely than fear. For a long moment, silence hung in the air. Men shuffled their boots. Women turned away. The idea was obscene, yet curiosity kept them rooted. Then a deep, commanding voice cut through the crowd. "I'll take them." All heads turned toward the edge of the square. Adrian Cole stepped forward, his tall frame casting a shadow over the sun-bleached dirt. A rancher of immense wealth, Adrian was known for his stoic manner and his unyielding discipline. His face was unreadable, his piercing gray eyes scanning the scene with the detachment of a man who had long ago learned to mask emotion. Victor laughed bitterly. "You Cole? The coldest man in the county? What would you want with a woman and 4 brats?" Adrian did not answer. Instead, he reached in his coat, pulled out a thick roll of bills, and tossed it at Victor's feet. The money scattered across the planks, glinting in the sunlight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That should cover your debt," Adrian said flatly. "They come with me." Maria's heart pounded. Relief, shame, and suspicion warred within her. She had been bought like livestock, saved yet humiliated, her fate once again tied to the will of a man. But this one was different, or so she prayed. Adrian's gaze met hers briefly, not with lust or ownership, but with something quieter, something unreadable. Victor crouched, scooping up the bills with greedy hands. His laugh echoed across the square, sharp and ugly. "Take them. They're yours. More trouble than they're worth anyway." With that, he staggered away, pockets bulging with fresh currency, leaving behind the wife and children he had discarded as easily as a pair of old boots. The crowd erupted into whispers. Some called Adrian a fool. Others whispered of scandal. A rancher with no wife suddenly purchasing another man's family. It would be the talk of the county for weeks. Adrian motioned for Maria and the children to follow. For a moment, no one moved. Elena glared at him with teenage defiance, her arms wrapped protectively around Gabriel. Matteo clenched his fists, his jaw tight with suspicion. Only Isabella took a hesitant step forward, her wide eyes filled with both fear and fragile hope. Maria gathered her children and moved. She had no choice. As they walked toward the waiting carriage, Maria dared a glance back. Victor was already at the saloon, laughing as he ordered drinks with his blood money. Her stomach twisted. He had not only gambled away their home, their food, their safety, he had gambled away their very lives. Worse still, he had gambled away his vows, his fidelity years before this day. Maria had lived with the rumors, the hushed whispers of his dalliances in the back rooms of taverns, the perfume that lingered on his shirt. She had turned a blind eye, hoping for change. Now the truth stood undeniable. Her husband's betrayal was complete. When they reached the carriage, Adrian spoke for the first time directly to her. "You're safe now. No one will touch you or the children while you're under my roof." The words should have comforted her, but instead, they sank into her heart like stones. Safe, yes, but at what cost? She had been claimed, traded, bound to a man she did not know. Her vows to Victor still weighed heavy on her soul, though he had shattered them long ago. The carriage wheels creaked as Adrian flicked the reins. The town square receded into the distance, the whispers fading into the wind. Maria sat stiffly, her children pressed close around her. She could feel Adrian's presence beside her, silent and unyielding, like a wall she could neither scale nor see through. For the first time in years, she was free from Victor's cruelty. Yet the question clawed at her. Had she merely traded one prison for another? The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road ahead. Maria stared into the horizon, her heart torn between fear and an unfamiliar flicker of hope. She did not know what awaited her on Adrian Cole's ranch. She only knew that her life and the lives of her children had been irreversibly changed in one afternoon. And deep within her, a dangerous truth stirred. She felt more alive under the gaze of a stranger than she ever had as the wife of her unfaithful husband. New life, new tensions. The ride to Adrian Cole's ranch stretched across miles of open prairie, where the wind whispered secrets through the tall grass. The children sat huddled close to Maria, their silence heavy, their gazes fixed on the horizon. Each bump of the carriage jolted them further from the life they had known, however cruel it had been, into a world unknown. Adrian said little as he guided the horses, his profile set against the waning sun. His silence was not cruel but deliberate, as though he understood words would only deepen the children's fear. Maria studied him from the corner of her eye. He was not a handsome man in the way of storybooks. His features were sharp, weathered by years of labor and solitude. But there was a strength about him, the kind that came not from muscle alone, but from an unbending will. When they reached the ranch, dusk had settled like a blanket across the land. The sprawling house, built of sturdy timber, stood at the center of vast fields. It was not ostentatious, but it radiated order, prosperity, and permanence. The children stared wide-eyed, their unease momentarily eclipsed by awe. Inside, a fire crackled on the hearth. Adrian gestured for them to sit while he brought bread and stew from the kitchen. The act was simple, yet it startled Maria. She had never seen Victor prepare food, let alone serve it. In her marriage, hunger had been her burden alone. The children ate cautiously at first, but hunger won over suspicion. Gabriel smiled through a mouthful, his innocence momentarily restored. Elena, however, remained stiff, her eyes never leaving Adrian. Mateo shoveled food quickly, his every gesture defiant, as though daring Adrian to challenge him. Isabella clung to Maria's sleeve, whispering that the house felt too big, too quiet. When the children finally drifted into sleep on makeshift bedding near the fire, Maria lingered at the table, her thoughts heavy. Adrian sat opposite her, his gaze steady but not invasive. "You need not fear me," he said at last, his tone calm, almost weary. "I brought you only to save you. What you and your children do here is your choice. Work if you wish, rest if you must. No one will take you from this place." Maria studied him, her heart torn. His words rang with sincerity, yet how could she trust? Victor had once spoken tenderly too, before his betrayals piled so high they buried her spirit. She folded her hands tightly, as if clutching the remnants of her vows. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered. "Taking us, it will ruin you. The town will call me faithless, even though it was my husband who betrayed me. They'll call you worse." Adrian's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "I've weathered worse storms than gossip. Let them talk. The words should have comforted her, but instead, they unsettled her. His calm acceptance of scandal revealed a man unafraid of the world's judgment. Maria realized she feared not his cruelty, but her own growing pull toward him. The days that followed revealed the rhythm of Adrian's ranch. At dawn, he rose to tend the cattle, his movements efficient and sure. The children, restless and uncertain, began to follow him. Mateo bristled at his authority, but could not resist the draw of learning to ride and rope. Elena hovered protectively near Maria, but softened when Adrian showed Gabriel how to feed the chickens. Isabella, shy but curious, watched Adrian with wide-eyed wonder, as though he were some figure pulled from legend. Maria kept to herself, mending clothes, sweeping floors, cooking meals when pride allowed. Yet she could not help noticing the subtle gestures. Adrian repairing Mateo's torn boot without a word, leaving extra blankets for the children on cold nights, speaking gently when Gabriel asked endless questions. He was not affectionate. His manner remained reserved, but his actions were steady, dependable, and it was his steadiness that shook Maria most of all. She had lived years with a husband whose fidelity was as fleeting as the dice he rolled. Rumors of Victor's mistresses had long haunted her nights. Whispers of infidelity she tried to smother beneath vows of loyalty. She had endured his betrayals, hoping he might change. Instead, he had sold her like a horse at market. Now here was Adrian Cole, a man bound to her by no vow, treating her and her children with a respect her husband had never shown. It was dangerous. This pull in her chest, this fragile bloom of trust she dared not water. To nurture it would be to betray vows that, though broken by Victor, still chained her heart. One evening, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, Maria found herself standing with Adrian beneath the porch roof. The wind whipped through the fields, carrying the scent of rain. For a long time, they watched in silence, until Adrian spoke. "You carry his shame as though it were your own," he said quietly. "But it was not you who betrayed. It was not you who sold your family." Maria's throat tightened. No one had ever spoken so plainly. She wanted to deny it, to cling to the duty drilled into her since girlhood, that a wife's loyalty endures no matter the man. But something in Adrian's words cracked the dam within her. Tears pricked her eyes, though she turned away so he would not see. "You don't understand," she murmured. To love again would be to sin. To even feel this, she caught herself, heart pounding, unable to finish the thought. Adrian said nothing more. He simply stood beside her as the storm broke, rain lashing the fields in silver sheets. His silence was not empty. It was presence, steady and unyielding. And in that silence, Maria felt her own heart betray her, leaning, ever so slightly, toward the man who had purchased her freedom. Forbidden desires and the breaking point. The weeks that followed settled into a fragile rhythm. Life on Adrian Cole's ranch was steady, orderly, and far removed from the chaos Maria had known. The children slowly adapted. Elena remained wary, but found solace in helping with household tasks. Mateo tested Adrian's patience, yet returned from the stables each evening with the dust of hard work on his clothes. Isabella blossomed in the quiet safety of the house, and Gabriel laughed more often than he cried. Maria, however, lived in the quiet tension between gratitude and guilt. Each kindness from Adrian pulled her further into dangerous territory. He never overstepped, never spoke words of affection, yet his very restraint unsettled her. Where Victor had flaunted his betrayals in the taverns and backrooms, Adrian's silence carried the weight of a man who chose his actions with care. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and gold, Maria carried a basket of laundry to the line. The air was cool, the grass damp with dew. She startled when Adrian appeared, carrying a broken fence post across his shoulder. His shirt clung to him with the sweat of labor, his presence filling the quiet space like a force of nature. "You should rest," Adrian said, setting the post aside. "You've done enough for one day." Maria kept her hands busy with the linens, refusing to meet his eyes. "Work keeps me steady. Idleness makes me remember." He paused, studying her profile. And what is it you remember? She bit her lip, her hands trembling slightly as she pinned a sheet to the line. The vows I made, the shame I carry, the whispers in town. They say I betrayed my husband already, simply by being here. The silence stretched. Then Adrian's voice came, quiet but firm. A vow is only as sacred as the man who honors it. You broke it long before you stepped foot on my land. The words pierced her. She turned to him at last, her eyes brimming. And what of me? If I feel something I should not, am I not betraying him, even now? For the first time, Adrian's mask cracked. A flicker of longing flashed in his gray eyes before he looked away. Feelings are not sin, Maria. Actions are. And I have no intention of claiming what is not mine. Her heart thundered. In that moment, she both hated and loved his restraint. She wanted him to cross the distance, to silence the ache inside her with the certainty of his touch. But she also feared it, feared the finality of stepping across a line she could never retreat from. The tension between them grew with each passing day. Elena sensed it first. One night, as the younger children slept, she confronted her mother in a whisper sharp as a knife. You look at him the way you used to look at father. Maria froze, the weight of her daughter's words crushing her. Elena, he's not our father, the girl hissed. And you, how can you forget so easily? Father may be cruel, but he is still your husband. Tears pricked Maria's eyes. She reached for her daughter, but Elena pulled away, her gaze filled with wounded betrayal. If you choose him, she whispered, then you betray us too. The words lingered long after Elena slipped into bed. Maria sat awake by the fire, her mind torn between duty and desire, between the husband who had discarded her and the man who had rescued her. Days later, the fragile balance shattered. Victor returned. It was a Sunday afternoon, the sun blazing high, when he rode into the ranch yard on a stolen horse, his clothes torn, his face hardened by bitterness. The children froze in terror, clustering around their mother. Maria's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the man who had gambled them away. Victor dismounted with a sneer. Maria, did you miss me? Or has Cole been keeping you warm at night? Adrian stepped forward, his posture like a drawn bow. You're not welcome here. Victor's eyes glittered with venom. She's still my wife. Those children are still mine. You bought nothing but gossip when you took them. The accusation cut through Maria like a blade. The townsfolk had already whispered, but hearing the words from Victor's lips made her knees weaken. She wanted to scream, to deny it, yet her silence betrayed the truth. Her heart no longer belonged to the man before her. Victor advanced, pointing a finger at her. Adulteress, he spat. You shame me before the whole West. Adrian moved, placing himself between them. His voice was calm, but iron lay beneath each word. You shamed yourself long before this day. The standoff burned like fire in the afternoon heat. Maria clutched Gabriel to her chest, her children's eyes wide with fear. Her heart raced with the realization that the time for silence was over. She could no longer hide behind vows broken by another man. She could no longer deny the truth that bound her to Adrian. And as Victor's threats echoed across the yard, Maria knew that the moment of decision had arrived. Resolution, infidelity exposed, love redeemed. The confrontation at the ranch yard did not end with raised fists or the crack of gunfire, but with something far more dangerous: Victor's venomous tongue and the town's hunger for scandal. By the following morning, rumors had spread like wildfire. Maria Delgado, once pitted as a discarded wife, was now whispered about as a woman of loose morals, a faithless spouse who had abandoned her vows for the shelter of another man's roof. For the first time since her arrival, Maria could not step into town without hearing her name hissed behind fans and clenched teeth. She walked through the market with her children pressed close, her cheeks burning. Every stolen glance, every muttered word pressed against her like a brand. Elena's earlier accusation echoed in her ears, deepening her guilt. That evening, Adrian found her by the corral, staring at the fading sun. You shouldn't listen to them, he said. Her voice trembled. How can I not? They see me as faithless. Perhaps they are right. Adrian's expression was grave, his gray eyes unreadable. "Do you believe yourself faithless, Maria?" She swallowed hard. "I don't know. I loved a man who betrayed me, and yet part of me clings to vows he destroyed. And now," she broke off, unable to confess aloud the dangerous truth that beat within her chest. Adrian stepped closer, the space between them taut with unspoken longing. "The truth has a way of surfacing," he said. "Sooner or later, they will see what kind of man Victor really is." His words proved prophetic. Days later, a gathering was called in town. Victor had filed a petition before the magistrate, demanding the return of his wife and children. He swaggered into the meeting hall, his smirk wide, his voice ringing with false righteousness. "This rancher stole what is mine. My wife, my children." He parades them under his roof while the whole West whispers of their sin. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some nodded, swayed by his theatrics. Others frowned, remembering his drunken nights and unpaid debts. Maria stood at the center, her hands trembling, her children clinging to her skirts. Adrian remained at her side, silent but steadfast, his presence anchoring her. The magistrate, a stern man with white whiskers, turned to Maria. "Do you deny your husband's claim?" Her throat tightened. To deny him meant confessing the betrayal she felt deep inside. To yield meant condemning herself and her children back into the hands of a man who had discarded them. Before she could speak, a voice rang out from the back of the hall. It was the innkeeper's wife, a stout woman with sharp eyes. "Victor Delgado talks of vows, but who saw him in the tavern with Rosa Jimenez, not once but a dozen times? Who paid her hush money when she carried his child?" A ripple tore through the room. Victor's face blanched, then darkened. "Lies," he shouted, but others stood now emboldened. A stable hand spoke of debts unpaid. A merchant swore Victor had traded stolen goods. Another woman, her face lined with bitterness, claimed Victor had promised her marriage even while wed to Maria. One by one, the voices rose, a chorus of accusations that stripped him bare. Maria's heart pounded. Each revelation was a blade cutting through the chains of shame she had carried. The truth was no longer a whisper in back alleys. It stood in the open, undeniable. At last, the magistrate struck his gavel. "Enough. Victor Delgado, your petitions are denied. You have broken every vow, squandered every right. This woman owes you nothing." Victor's fury boiled over. He lunged, but Adrian stepped forward, catching his arm in an iron grip. Their eyes locked, Victor's wild with rage, Adrian steady as stone. With a sharp shove, Adrian cast him back. "You've lost, Delgado. Not to me, but to yourself." The hall fell silent as Victor staggered to the door, his curses echoing until they faded into the night. Maria stood trembling, her tears spilling freely at last, not of shame, but of release. The weight she had carried for years had been lifted in a single afternoon. She turned to Adrian, her voice breaking. "I am free, truly free." Adrian's gaze softened. For the first time, the stoic mask slipped, revealing the vulnerability beneath. "Then choose, Maria. Not out of fear, not out of obligation. Choose because your heart commands it." The words struck her deeper than any vow spoken at an altar. Slowly, she reached for his hand, her children watching with wide eyes. "Then I choose you," she whispered. "Not because you saved me, not because you sheltered us, but because with you, I feel seen. And I have never known that before." The hall, once thick with tension, now buzzed with murmurs of awe. Some still whispered scandal, but others nodded, their expressions softening. What Adrian Cole had done, buying a family at auction, defending them against ruin, was no longer seen as folly, but as an act that stunned the West with its quiet nobility. That evening, as the family returned to the ranch, the horizon stretched wide and golden before them. Maria sat in the carriage with her children pressed close, her hand firmly in Adrian's. The chains of infidelity and betrayal had been shattered, replaced by something fragile yet fierce, love born not from vows, but from truth. And though whispers would linger, Maria no longer feared them. For the first time in years, her heart was her own.